Officer fired 3 bullets at a black woman. Minutes later, the courtroom exploded. Before we start today's story, comment below where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you haven't already. You won't want to miss what's next. The Transportation Security Administration fired 3 bullets at a black woman who, minutes later, would walk into a federal courtroom and begin tearing down their system from the inside out. The first bullet only grazed her shoulder. The second shattered the glass window behind her. The third slammed into the concrete pillar where families used to hug before saying goodbye. 4 seconds later, the woman everyone thought was just another passenger stood up through the smoke and confusion. Blood streamed down her arm. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She looked straight at the officer who had shot her and said, calm and clear, "You just shot a federal judge, officer. I suggest you holster that weapon immediately." Every sound in Terminal C disappeared. No one dared move. Not Officer Ryan Cole, his gun still trembling in his hands. Not the passengers crouched behind their luggage carts. Not the TSA agents frozen halfway through shouting commands. Silence didn't just fall. It crashed down like the final hit of a judge's gavel. Judge Nia Carter stood tall, even with blood soaking through her coat. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp and commanding, cutting through the chaos around her. She looked directly at Ryan. "I am unarmed," she said, "and I followed every instruction you gave me. So tell me, Officer Cole, what exactly did you see that made you decide to pull that trigger?" Ryan's eyes flickered back and forth like those of a trapped animal. Sweat rolled down his face even though the air conditioning was on full blast. She reached, he stammered. She reached fast into her jacket. Could have been anything. Nia raised her right hand slowly. Between her fingers was a crumpled boarding pass for Flight 447 to Charleston. "This?" she asked. "This piece of paper scared you so much you emptied your clip?" From behind the metal detector, a young voice broke the tension. "That's not what happened." It was Daniel Brooks, a 23-year-old TSA agent. He was the son of a Birmingham mechanic and a substitute teacher. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "I saw everything," he said. "She didn't lunge, she didn't yell. She asked why she was being detained, and you drew your gun before she even finished speaking." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Agent Brooks, stand down. Now." Daniel didn't move. He lifted his wrist so everyone could see the small smartwatch strapped there. "I started recording the moment your voice changed," Daniel said. "That tone you get when you think no one is important is watching. I've worked with you for 8 months. I know that tone." Then he looked straight into a nearby security camera. "If you believe no one should be shot for asking a question, type justice in the comments." People were starting to move again. Passengers peeked from behind benches and carts, phones slowly appearing in their hands. A teenage boy near Gate 12 pointed his phone high above the crowd, streaming live. His voice cracked between shock and excitement. "Yo, did the TSA just shoot a federal judge?" Nia turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "Keep filming," she said. "Everything." Paramedics rushed through the security gate, pushing a stretcher. "Ma'am, you've been shot. We need to treat you right now." Nia raised her bloody hand. "You'll treat me only after every body camera, every security feed, and every witness statement is logged into an unbroken chain of custody. Nothing deleted. Nothing edited. Nothing misplaced." A paramedic hesitated. "Ma'am, you're bleeding a lot." "Then we better move quickly," Nia interrupted. "But we do this right, or we don't do it at all." Behind her, Officer Cole's arm began to shake. His gun sagged lower, but he still hadn't holstered it. His supervisor, a gray-haired man named Richards, finally arrived. His badge was slightly crooked. His radio dangled uselessly from his vest. "What the hell happened here?" Richards demanded. Ryan spoke fast, trying to control the story. "Non-compliant passenger. Refused commands. Made aggressive movements." "She was holding a boarding pass," Daniel said. "She asked one question. Why am I being detained?" That's when he drew his gun. Nia's breathing grew heavier as the adrenaline began to fade, but her mind stayed razor sharp. She hadn't planned to reveal who she was. Not like this, not bleeding on an airport floor in front of terrified children. She looked straight at Richards. "My name is Judge Nia Daniel Carter. I serve on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. And I just became living evidence of what happens when you give a man like Officer Cole a badge and a fear he's never learned to control." The words hit like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed through the terminal. A phone slipped from someone's hand and clattered to the floor. Richards turned pale. Nia kept talking, her voice rising even as blood dripped from her fingers. "Call your director. Call your legal team. Call whoever you need to call, because this airport is now a federal crime scene, and I'm about to turn it into a courtroom." Richards scrambled for his radio. Nia turned back toward Ryan. "And Officer Cole," she said, "you're about to learn that some people don't just have rights. They know how to enforce them." 6 hours earlier, Judge Nia Carter left her Georgetown townhouse in jeans, white sneakers, and a navy jacket. Every detail was intentional. Today, she wasn't traveling as Judge Carter. She was traveling as Nia, a 34-year-old black woman with a boarding pass and a theory she hoped would be proven wrong. 3 weeks earlier, her 18-year-old nephew, Elijah, had been randomly selected for additional screening at Reagan National Airport. He was an honor roll student, headed to Howard University on a full scholarship. His only mistake was the color of his skin and the confidence in his walk. Nia still remembered his voice cracking when he told her, "Aunt Mia, they made me feel like I was already guilty of something." That had lit something inside her. She wanted to understand, firsthand, what it felt like to move through the world without the shield of her title or power. So she designed an experiment. No special clearance. No bodyguards. No TSA pre-check. Just Nia Carter, ordinary citizen, carrying a briefcase filled with civil rights case files and a boarding pass. The first 2 airports were subtle. In Denver, she noticed the agent's suspicious glance, the extra questions about her destination. In Atlanta, they stared at her ID longer than usual. Nothing she could file a complaint about. But she felt the bias, quiet and sharp, like a whisper behind a smile. Then came Charlotte, and Officer Ryan Cole. Back to the present. The terminal was buzzing now, full of tension and whispers. Nia sat on the floor against a concrete beam. A compression bandage covered her shoulder. Her breathing was slow but controlled. A tall, serious federal marshal walked up, his face tight with nerves. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "your presence here has triggered alerts all the way to Carter. The Department of Justice is mobilizing. Your court administrator is on the way. We need to manage the situation." Nia's voice dropped, quiet but sharp. "Manage? Marshal, I was shot in a federal facility by a federal officer because he saw my skin as a threat. You want to manage that?" The marshal froze. He understood the danger of his next words. Nia picked up her phone. She had 847 missed calls, but she didn't bother with voicemails. Instead, she opened a secure app on her home screen, an app she designed herself, called Constitutional Emergency Protocol. It had 3 steps. Secure all evidence. Isolate the narrative. Control the legal response. She dialed a number from memory. "Marshal Torres, this is Judge Carter. I need federal investigative presence at Charlotte Douglas International immediately. Full forensic team. Yes, I'm the victim. No, this is not a mistake." The officer. Across the terminal, in a small windowless room, Ryan Cole sat with his union representative and a government lawyer. Ryan's leg bounced uncontrollably. His fingers tapped the table like a metronome. "I didn't know who she was," he kept repeating. "She looked like she was reaching. What was I supposed to think?" The lawyer sighed, rubbing his temples. "You need to stop saying that." "Why?" Ryan snapped. "It's the truth." The lawyer leaned forward. "Because what you thought is exactly the problem. You thought a black woman asking a question was a threat. You thought following your gut meant pulling the trigger. You thought your fear made it okay." Ryan's face went red. She had this attitude, like she thought she was better than me. The union rep shifted uncomfortably. The lawyer's voice turned hard. Stop talking. Do you realize what you've done? You didn't just shoot a passenger. You shot a federal judge. You shoot someone who decides whether cases like yours get thrown out or prosecuted. Ryan's mouth fell open. A judge. The lawyer nodded grimly. Judge Nia Carter isn't just any judge. She's one of the brightest legal minds in the country. She's written rulings that changed how civil rights law works. And you shot her because she asked why you were detaining her. The witness. Meanwhile, Daniel Brooks paced outside the TSA employee break room. His badge was gone. His access card disabled. His job, almost certainly over. HR had called him insubordinate for speaking up. His supervisor wouldn't even meet his eyes. But before security took his smartwatch, Daniel had uploaded the video. He'd sent the link to a contact his college roommate had mentioned once, Elijah Moore, an investigative journalist who specialized in government misconduct. Elijah wasn't famous, but people who cared about truth knew his name. He was the reporter who had exposed racist group chats among sheriff's deputies. He had recovered lost police body cam footage. Daniel's message to him was short. They shot a federal judge and didn't even know it. Within minutes, Elijah was deep into the story. He pulled flight records, cross-checked names, and read through Judge Carter's public rulings. Then he whispered to himself, "They picked the wrong woman to profile." He opened a new document and began typing. She didn't even flinch. That became his headline. The first paragraph flowed naturally. At 2:47 p.m. yesterday, TSA officer Ryan Cole shot federal judge Nia Carter 3 times inside Charlotte Douglas International Airport. She was unarmed. She was compliant. She was asking a question, and now she's preparing to ask that same question in federal court, with the power to dismantle the system that trained him to pull the trigger. Elijah embedded the raw video. He uploaded everything to multiple encrypted servers. Then he pressed publish. His notifications exploded. Within 5 minutes, the story was everywhere. The doctor. Back in the airport's temporary medical area, Nia sat upright on a stretcher. She had refused heavy painkillers. She wanted her mind clear. A woman in a lab coat entered the room, her expression tight with anger. "Judge Carter," she said. "I'm Dr. Veronica Reyes, Chief Medical Officer at Charlotte Memorial. I came as soon as I heard." She paused, searching for words. This is unbelievable. This is unconscionable." Nia gave a tired smile. "Unbelievable, yes. But not unexpected." Dr. Reyes frowned. "You knew something like this could happen?" Nia nodded slowly. "I hoped it wouldn't. But I needed to know what happens when I take off the robe, when I stop being Judge Carter and become just Nia, a black woman in an airport." The doctor shook her head. "You shouldn't have had to prove that with your blood." "No one should," Nia said quietly. The storm that followed. By the time the story hit national news, the video had millions of views. Airports around the country were buzzing with protests. Civil rights groups called for Cole's arrest. Government officials scrambled to control the narrative, but the footage spoke louder than any press release. In the clip, Nia's calm voice echoed over and over again online. "You just shot a federal judge, officer." Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag Justice for Nia. Hashtag Terminal C. Hashtag She Asked a Question. Inside a secure room, Nia met with federal investigators. Her shoulder was freshly bandaged, her skin pale, but her eyes burned with determination. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about every person who's been treated as dangerous simply for existing." A reporter outside asked, "Judge Carter, do you plan to sue the TSA?" She paused, then said, "I don't plan to sue. I plan to reform." The reckoning. Later that night, in a quiet hotel room under protective watch, Nia replayed the video herself. She watched her own body jerk as the bullets tore through the air. She watched herself stand up, bleeding but unbroken. She whispered to the reflection in the window, "You didn't flinch. She opened her laptop and began drafting a speech titled, "The Cost of Compliance." It would become her first public address after the shooting, a speech that would change how America talked about fear, race, and authority. Her words on the page were simple but powerful. Obedience didn't save me. Respectability didn't protect me. Education didn't shield me. My rights didn't matter until I demanded them, out loud, bleeding, in front of witnesses. As she typed, she thought of her nephew Elijah, of Daniel, who risked everything to tell the truth, of the teenage boy at Gate 12, still replaying his video for the world. And she thought of Officer Ryan Cole, sitting alone in some holding room, his fear finally turned inward. Nia closed her laptop, leaned back, and whispered the same line she had said in Terminal C. Some people don't just have rights. They know how to enforce them. Nia looked closely at the older black woman's face. There was something familiar in her eyes, something heavy and tired but strong. "You've seen this before," Nia said quietly. "Not exactly like this," the woman replied, sitting down with a deep sigh. "But yes, I've seen it." Dr. Reyes pressed her hands together, her voice shaking slightly. "My son Jerome was pulled over 6 times last year. 6 times, just for driving while black. He was in a BMW I bought him for graduating medical school. Every single time, the police claimed they were just doing their jobs. And every single time, I sat waiting for a call, wondering if it would be my son coming home or someone calling to tell me he wouldn't." Nia's jaw tightened. "Dr. Reyes, I need you to record everything about my injuries. Every bruise, every mark, every cut. Not just for medical reasons, for legal ones. I need pictures, timestamps, and descriptions. Everything." The doctor looked surprised. "You're planning to sue them?" Nia shook her head. "No. I'm planning to change them." Back at the police interrogation room, Ryan Cole's world was falling apart. The union lawyer sat across from him, scrolling through his phone. His face grew paler with every paragraph he read. "It's gone viral," the lawyer said quietly. 50,000 shares in the first hour. CNN picked it up. MSNBC wants an interview. Fox News already has a panel discussing it. Ryan slumped in his chair, staring at the table. "But I didn't know," he whispered. "That's the problem," the lawyer said sharply. "You didn't know because you didn't care to find out. You didn't ask. You saw a black woman who questioned your authority, and your training told you that was a threat." The union representative crossed his arms. "What kind of defense can we even give him?" The lawyer was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Honestly, none. The video is too clear. She did everything right. No sudden moves. No aggression. No disrespect. You shot a federal judge, Ryan." She only asked, "Why am I being detained?" "There's no legal defense for that." Ryan's legs stopped bouncing. His throat tightened as the weight of reality hit him. "So what happens to me?" "You lose your job. You lose your pension. You'll probably face federal charges. And Judge Carter will oversee the case that could rewrite TSA's entire security protocol." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his face pale. The words hit like stones. That night, in her hospital room, Nia was resting when her phone buzzed. The screen showed an encrypted number. "Judge Carter, this is Daniel Brooks," the voice said nervously. "The TSA agent who—" "I know who you are, Mr. Brooks," Nia interrupted calmly. "Are you safe?" "I've been suspended," he said quickly. "They're talking about charging me with insubordination. But Judge, you need to know, this wasn't the first time. Ryan has a record. There are other complaints, but they got buried. I have proof." "What kind of proof?" Nia asked, sitting up, ignoring the sharp pain in her shoulder. "Internal emails," he explained. "Training materials that teach us how to spot so-called non-verbal threats. Supervisors praise officers for their intuition, but it's all coded language. When you put it all together, it's obvious. It's systematic discrimination, racism disguised as security training." Nia nodded slowly. Exactly. And Judge, he added, I'm not the only one who noticed. There are other agents who hate what's happening, but speaking up means losing your job. It means the end of your career. Not anymore, Nia said firmly. Mr. Brooks, I'm calling an emergency federal hearing. I'll need you to testify. They'll destroy me, he said softly. They already tried to destroy me, Nia replied. Now it's our turn. After hanging up, she opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she drafted a formal request for an emergency judicial review. This wasn't just about her. This was about every person who had ever been profiled, harassed, or harmed in the name of security. Her phone buzzed again. A text appeared from an unknown number. Saw the news. If you need backup in court, you've got it. Judge Veronica Price, Second Circuit. Another text came seconds later. Standing with you. Judge David Park, Ninth Circuit. Then a third. About time someone with power got hurt instead of just the people no one listens to. Judge Sofia Delgado, 11th Circuit. For the first time since the shooting, Nia smiled faintly. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a judge, a plaintiff, and a weapon for justice. Tomorrow, she was going to court. The next morning, Nia stood in front of her hotel room mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't the same woman from yesterday. The bandage on her shoulder looked bright white against her dark skin. The bruise around it had turned deep purple, fading into black. But her eyes held something fierce. The quiet fire of a woman who had seen the truth of the system and decided to burn it down from the inside. Her phone rang again. Judge Carter, this is Attorney General Veronica Morrison, a voice said. I want to personally assure you that the Department of Justice is taking this matter very seriously. Are you? Nia asked coolly. Because I just read the TSA's preliminary report. They're calling this an isolated incident involving a passenger who failed to follow procedure. Silence. Ms. Morrison, Nia continued, I was shot by a federal officer while following federal procedures. If that's the TSA's position, this conversation is over. I'll see you in court. Judge Carter, please, Morrison said quickly. We're offering a full investigation. I'm not interested in your investigation, Nia interrupted. I'm conducting my own, under federal judicial review authority. I'm convening an emergency hearing to examine TSA's training and their compliance with the Constitution. You can't be both the victim and the presiding judge, Morrison said. Nia's voice turned ice cold. Watch me. She hung up and called her clerk. Rachel, I need an emergency docket filed for tomorrow morning. Full federal hearing at Charlotte Federal Courthouse. Defendants, TSA, Charlotte Douglas Airport Authority, and Officer Ryan Cole personally. Mom, her daughter's voice hesitated. Are you sure? The optics. The optics, Nia cut in, are that a federal judge was shot by a federal officer. If they don't like how that looks, they shouldn't have pulled the trigger. Across town, Ryan Cole sat on his living room couch, still in his TSA uniform. His phone buzzed nonstop, calls, texts, emails, death threats, messages of support, news requests, even offers from lawyers. His wife Lauren sat across from him, pale and shaken. Ryan, they're saying she's a federal judge. You shot a federal judge. I didn't know, Ryan said for the 100th time. She acted like, Lauren started, then stopped. Like what, Ryan? Ryan frowned. Like a black woman who thought she could talk back. Don't start that racial stuff, he said quickly. It wasn't about race. Lauren stared at him long and hard. For the first time, she really saw her husband, the man she'd been married to for 7 years. Then what was it about? She asked quietly. What made you think shooting her was the right thing to do? Ryan tried to answer but couldn't. The truth that sat in his chest was ugly. What had scared him about Nia had nothing to do with danger. It was about control. About seeing a black woman who wasn't afraid of him. She should have been more respectful, he said finally. Lauren's voice broke. Respectful of what? Your right to detain her for no reason. Before Ryan could respond, his phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered automatically. Officer Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Elijah Moore, investigative journalist. I'm writing a follow-up on yesterday's incident. Do you have a comment? No comment, Ryan said quickly. Just one question, Elijah pressed. Were you ever trained to assess threats based on race? Of course not. That's illegal, Ryan snapped. Then how do you explain shooting an unarmed, compliant black woman who was simply asking why she was being detained? Ryan hung up. But it was too late. Elijah had recorded the call, and Ryan's defensive tone would be the headline of tomorrow's article. At Charlotte Memorial Hospital, Daniel Brooks sat in the waiting room beside his mother. She had driven down from Greensboro as soon as she heard he was involved. Baby, tell me you did the right thing, she said, holding his hands tightly. I filmed it, Mama, Daniel said quietly. I recorded everything. They shot her, and now they're saying I betrayed my oath. His mother, a retired teacher who had spent 30 years watching black kids punished for nothing, smiled sadly but proudly. You didn't betray anything, she said. You honored your oath. Sometimes your duty isn't to the institution, it's to the truth. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Nia. Hearing tomorrow, 9 a.m. Are you ready to testify? He showed his mother. She read it twice, her eyes filling with pride. You text her back right now, she said. Tell her Daniel Brooks will be there. Tell her you'll tell the truth. And if they don't like it, they can explain to God why shooting an innocent woman seemed more important than doing what's right. Daniel nodded and typed, I'll be there with evidence. By evening, the story was everywhere. Every major network was running it. Legal experts argued on live TV. Social media was on fire. People were split, some shouting justice for Judge Carter, others claiming she was using her power for revenge. But Nia wasn't watching any of it. She sat at her desk, focused and calm. Because this wasn't about fame. This was about justice. Not just for her, but for every black person who had ever been treated like a criminal just for existing. And this time, the judge looked like them. The next morning, the Charlotte Federal Courthouse was a scene like never before. By 7 a.m., 2 hours before the hearing, crowds filled the sidewalks outside. Protesters held signs, Justice for Judge Carter, End Racial Profiling, Back the Blue. News vans lined the streets, their antennas stretching toward the cloudy sky. Federal marshals stood guard at every entrance. Inside, the largest courtroom in the building was packed. Every seat was filled. The first row held Nia's law clerks and her small legal team. The second row contained TSA officials, the airport authority, and Ryan Cole's defense attorneys. Behind them sat journalists, activists, law students, and citizens from across the South who had come to witness history. At 8:55 a.m., the courtroom doors opened. The room went silent. Nia Carter entered, wearing her full black judicial robe. The fabric moved around her like armor. The white bandage on her shoulder was still visible through the cloth, a quiet reminder of what had brought her here. She walked slowly but with strength, her eyes steady on the bench ahead. When she reached her seat, she looked out over the packed courtroom. Every person could feel it, the weight of the moment. A woman who had been shot by the system was now about to judge it. This emergency federal hearing is now in session, the clerk announced. The Honorable Judge Nia Daniel Carter presiding. The words echoed like thunder. Nia opened the file before her and spoke clearly. We are here to examine the events of April 15th at Charlotte Douglas International Airport, specifically the shooting of a federal judge by TSA officer Ryan Cole. She paused, her gaze moving across the room. But we are also here for something greater, to determine whether the airport security system in this country still respects the constitutional rights it was created to protect. Her eyes landed on the TSA lawyers. Counselor Morrison, you represent the Transportation Security Administration. Please state your agency's position. Attorney Morrison stood. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened her papers. Your Honor, The TSA maintains that Officer Cole acted according to standard protocols when faced with what he believed to be a non-compliant and potentially threatening individual. Non-compliant how? Nia asked sharply. The subject questioned the detention, Morrison said, spoke in a resistant manner, and made sudden movements toward her clothing. Nia reached under the bench and pulled out a laptop. Bailiff, she said, please activate the courtroom monitors. Screens dropped from the ceiling, flickering to life. The video began to play, clear footage from Daniel Brooks's smartwatch. It showed Nia calmly approaching the security checkpoint, placing her belongings on the conveyor belt, walking through the metal detector without incident, and standing still, unarmed, compliant, respectful. The courtroom went dead silent. And for the first time, America watched the truth unfold, not from the mouth of authority, but from the eyes of justice itself. The courtroom was completely silent as Ryan stepped forward, his hand already moving toward his gun before Mia had even finished turning around. Step aside, Ryan said, his voice echoing through the speakers. Mia's voice stayed calm. Is there a problem? Hands where I can see them. Move to secondary screening, Ryan ordered. Why am I being detained? She asked. That was the moment everything changed. On the big screen in front of the court, everyone could see Ryan pull out his weapon before Mia had even finished speaking. His finger was already resting on the trigger, while Mia stood there, still and unarmed, both her hands clearly visible. She posed no threat to anyone, except, it seemed, to Ryan Cole. The sound of the 3 gunshots echoed through the courtroom speakers like thunder. When the video ended, there was total silence. Mia let that silence hang for half a minute before speaking. Counselor Morrison, she said quietly, please point out the exact moment in that video where I failed to comply. Morrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He finally said, Your Honor, the suspect questioned the detention. Asking, why am I being detained, is considered non-compliance in a security setting. In a constitutional setting, Mia interrupted, her tone sharp, asking why you are being detained is a basic, protected right. Are you suggesting that TSA policy is more important than the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution? Morrison looked helplessly toward his legal team. Nobody offered him help. Let me ask you directly, Mia continued. Does the TSA train its officers to believe that asking a question is a reason to use deadly force? No, Your Honor, Morrison said weakly. Does the TSA train its officers to treat African American passengers differently? Absolutely not. Then please explain, Mia said, her voice rising slightly, why Officer Cole drew his weapon on an unarmed passenger who was calm, compliant, and whose only action was to ask a legal question protected by the Constitution. Morrison didn't respond. He slowly sat back down. Mia looked toward the gallery. The court calls Daniel Brooks. A tall man stood up from the benches. Daniel Brooks walked to the witness stand with the calm, determined posture of someone who had already sacrificed everything but found peace in telling the truth. He placed his hand on the Bible and said the oath aloud, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Mr. Brooks, Mia began, you're a TSA agent stationed at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Please tell the court what you observed on April 15th. Daniel took a deep breath. His testimony wouldn't just describe what happened. It would expose a deep problem that had been ignored for years. When he began speaking, the air in the courtroom changed. Every person in the room could feel it. They weren't just hearing about a single shooting anymore. They were witnessing something far bigger. This was the beginning of a reckoning, a moment that would force America to rethink how it balanced security with civil rights. The woman who had been shot wasn't just asking for justice anymore. She was delivering it. Daniel spoke clearly, his hands steady. Your Honor, I've been a TSA agent for about 14 months. In that time, I've seen patterns of behavior that everyone around me said were normal, but they didn't feel right from the start. Mia leaned forward slightly. Please describe these patterns, Mr. Brooks. Black passengers, Hispanic passengers, Arab passengers, they're pulled aside for extra screening much more often than others, he said. They're questioned longer, their bags get searched more aggressively. And when they ask why, officers like Ryan Cole get defensive, like the question itself is an act of defiance. Daniel looked at Ryan, who sat at the defense table, shrinking smaller by the second. Officer Cole has a saying, Daniel continued. He says, compliance isn't just following orders, it's following them with the right attitude. And according to him, the right attitude means being scared enough to never question anything. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. Mia raised her hand, and the room fell silent again. Mr. Brooks, she said, do you have proof of what you're saying? If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe and share your favorite part in the comments below. And don't forget to drop a heart to show your support. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. I do, Your Honor. This contains emails, reports, and even internal training materials that shouldn't exist. For the last 6 months, I've been collecting evidence because I knew this day would come. The TSA's lead attorney shot to his feet. Objection. This evidence was never shared with us. This is an emergency federal hearing, Mia said evenly. Standard discovery rules don't apply. Mr. Brooks, please describe what's on that flash drive. Daniel's voice grew stronger with every word. The email shows supervisors discussing so-called statistical anomalies, which is really code for why more passengers of color get pulled aside. The training videos sound neutral but always end up describing behaviors associated with people of color. And there are dozens of reports, complaints from passengers that get ignored or written off as misunderstandings. He looked straight at Mia. Your Honor, in my 14 months at the TSA, I've seen 17 official complaints filed against Officer Cole. 17. All involving minority passengers. Every one of them dismissed as procedural misunderstandings or communication problems. The courtroom erupted in noise, reporters typing frantically, people gasping, lawyers whispering urgently. Mia's voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Brooks, in your opinion, was the shooting on April 15th an isolated incident, or part of a larger pattern? It was inevitable, Your Honor, Daniel said without hesitation. Officer Cole's behavior has been escalating for months. He's been getting angrier, more paranoid, and more convinced that anyone who doesn't act scared must be dangerous. What happened to you was the natural result of a system that teaches fear and calls it vigilance. Mia turned toward the TSA lawyers. Counselor Morrison, does your client wish to respond to Agent Brooks's testimony? Morrison looked at Ryan, who sat frozen. Your Honor, we request a short recess to review. Request denied, Mia said immediately. This is an emergency hearing because a federal judge was shot in a federal building. There will be no delays. She looked at Ryan. Officer Cole, please take the stand. Ryan's lawyer whispered frantically to him, but Ryan stood anyway. He walked to the witness stand like a man walking toward his own execution. Mia studied him for a long moment before speaking. Officer Cole, you shot me 3 times yesterday. I want you to look at me and tell this court why. Ryan's eyes darted around the room. You seemed. Look at me, Mia interrupted. He finally met her eyes. The intelligence and calm fury in her gaze made him flinch. I thought you were a threat, he said quietly. Based on what? Mia asked. You questioned the detention. You weren't respectful of the process. Officer Cole, is respect for your authority a requirement for not being shot? Mia's tone was sharp. Ryan's lawyer half stood, but Ryan was already speaking. No, but you have to understand, we see a lot of. A lot of what? She pressed. The room went dead quiet. Everyone knew what he wanted to say but didn't dare. A lot of people who don't respect authority, he finally said. What kind of people, Officer Cole? Ryan's face turned red. He looked around for help, but no one said a word. When you saw me approach that checkpoint, Mia asked slowly, what did you see? The silence stretched for almost a full minute. Then Ryan Cole, federal security officer, said the words that changed everything. I saw a black woman who thought she was better than me. The courtroom exploded, gasps, shouts, the frantic clicking of reporters' keyboards. Mia struck her gavel once. The noise stopped instantly. Thank you for your honesty, Officer Cole, she said calmly. Please continue. What made you think I believed I was better than you? Ryan's voice broke. You didn't look scared. You asked questions like you had the right to answer. You stood there like you expected to be treated with respect. Mia's voice was so quiet the court reporter had to lean forward to hear. And in your training, Officer Cole, what happens to black women who expect to be treated with respect? Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. Finally, he whispered, they get reminded that respect has to be earned. By being shot? Mia asked. Ryan's voice trembled. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I just saw you, and something in my head said, threat, and I pulled the trigger. Mia leaned back. She had just gotten a confession of racially motivated assault from a federal officer, on the record, in open court. No further questions. The words, they get reminded that respect has to be earned, hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Everyone knew those words would be remembered for decades. But Mia Carter wasn't done. She turned toward the gallery. The court calls Dr. Veronica Reyes. The chief medical officer stood and walked to the stand, her eyes fixed on Mia. Dr. Reyes, Mia said, you treated my injuries yesterday. Please tell the court what you observed. 3 gunshot wounds, Dr. Reyes said firmly. 1 grazed your shoulder, causing severe tissue damage and heavy blood loss. The bullet paths show the shooter aimed for your chest. He was shooting to kill, not to wound. Gasps filled the courtroom. TSA's Attorney Morrison jumped up. Objection. The witness is guessing about intent. Mia responded calmly. Dr. Reyes is a forensic pathologist with 30 years of experience. Her expertise is beyond question. Please continue, Doctor. In my professional opinion, Dr. Reyes said, Officer Cole's aim shows clear intent to kill. These weren't warning shots or accidents. He was trying to end your life. You survived only because you moved at the last second. Ryan looked pale as a ghost. His lawyer scribbled notes desperately, knowing it was useless. Dr. Reyes, Mia asked, based on your experience with victims of police or security violence, how does this case compare? This is the most obvious example of racially motivated assault I've ever documented, Dr. Reyes said. The video evidence and his confession prove not just personal guilt, but a deeper problem, a system that encourages this behavior. Officer Cole didn't act alone. He acted exactly how he was trained. The room erupted again. Reporters typed furiously. Civil rights activists began chanting, "Justice now," until the judge's gavel struck sharply for order. One last question, Dr. Reyes, Mia said. If I had been any other black woman, a teacher, a nurse, a mother traveling with her children, would the outcome have been different? Dr. Reyes looked directly at Ryan. She'd be dead, she said flatly. And her case would have been closed as a justified shooting within a week. Mia nodded slowly. The court calls TSA Supervisor James Richards. Richards walked to the stand, looking like a man sinking into quicksand. He knew what was coming. Supervisor Richards, Mia began, how many complaints were filed against Officer Cole in the past year? Richards shifted uncomfortably. I'd have to check the exact number. 17, Mia said, holding up a thick folder. 17 formal complaints, all dismissed by your office as misunderstandings. Would you like me to read them? Your Honor, I followed protocol in each case, Richards said weakly. The protocol that protects officers who racially profile passengers? Mia asked sharply. There is no such protocol, he stammered. Mia opened the first file. Complaint number 1. Deshaun Thompson, age 17, detained for suspicious behavior. He was reading his college acceptance letter. You wrote, passenger behavior warranted additional screening. Complaint number 2. Sophia Gonzalez, traveling with her infant, strip searched because Officer Cole said the baby's crying was a distraction. You wrote, officer exercised appropriate caution. Shall I continue? Richard sank lower in his chair. Your Honor, we receive hundreds of complaints. Not like these, Mia interrupted. Complaints about other officers get investigated. Coals get buried. Why? Silence filled the room. Supervisor Richards, Mia said firmly, you're under oath. Did you know Officer Cole had issues with racial bias? Richards looked toward the TSA lawyers, searching for help that wasn't coming. There were signs, he admitted. What kind of signs? Comments. Jokes. The way he spoke about certain passengers. And what did you do about those signs? I spoke with him informally, Richards said. You spoke with him informally about treating black passengers like threats? Mia pressed. I told him to be more diplomatic, Richard said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. Ma leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath and letting the moment sink in. The air in the courtroom felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath. Supervisor Richards, she said calmly, how many black TSA agents work under your command? Richards swallowed hard before answering. 3 out of 47. Mia's eyes didn't move. And how many of those 3 have filed complaints about their work environment? Richards looked pale now. All of them. What kind of complaints? She asked, her tone sharp but steady. Complaints about racial jokes, unfair treatment, and being left out of certain duties, he admitted quietly. And how did you handle those complaints? We did diversity training, Richards said quickly. And we gave Officer Cole some informal counseling. The whole unit also went through sensitivity training. Mia nodded slowly. So when Officer Cole shot me yesterday, it wasn't just one man acting out of nowhere. It was the predictable result of a workplace culture that you helped create and then protected. Richards didn't answer. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't destroy him. Mia's voice cut through the silence. You may step down, Supervisor Richards. As Richards left, Mia straightened the papers on her desk. The court calls its final witness, Elijah Moore. The courtroom murmured as Elijah Moore, a well-known investigative journalist, walked to the witness stand. He looked confident, the way only someone could look when they had proof on their side. He was sworn in and took his seat. Mr. Moore, Mia began, how long have you been investigating TSA practices? 3 years, Your Honor, Elijah said. Ever since the Ahmaud Arbery case. It made me wonder how many other government institutions were operating on the same racist assumptions that got him killed. Mia nodded. And what have you discovered? Elijah picked up his tablet, scrolling through files. A consistent pattern of racial profiling by TSA officers. I've documented similar incidents in 17 airports across 12 states. Every case involved people of color being unfairly targeted. Every time, supervisors brushed it off as an isolated event. How many total cases? Mia asked. 437 documented cases, Elijah said clearly. And that's just the number of passengers who officially filed complaints. The number hit the room like a physical punch. 437 people, and those were only the ones who spoke up. The courtroom fell silent. Mia could feel the heat of anger building in her chest. Mr. Moore, she continued, did you find any training materials that might explain why this pattern keeps repeating? I did, Elijah said grimly. With the court's permission, I'd like to play a recording from a TSA training session held in Atlanta 6 months ago. It was secretly recorded by a whistleblower. Permission granted, Mia said. The courtroom speakers crackled. A man's voice played over them, calm but dripping with bias. I'm not saying you should profile based on race, that's illegal, the instructor said. But certain demographic groups tend to show behaviors that line up with security risks. You'll learn to spot the signs, attitude, the way they move, the questions they ask. Trust your instincts, because political correctness has gotten officers killed. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Mia looked around the room. TSA representatives looked embarrassed, some staring at the floor. Officer Ryan Cole sat still, eyes down. The people in the gallery now understood what Mia already knew. This wasn't about one man, it was about the entire system. Mr. Moore, she asked quietly, who was the instructor in that recording? Assistant Director Michael Park, National Training Division, Elijah said. He's given that exact same speech at 43 training centers across the United States. Nia nodded. No further questions. As Elijah left the stand, Nia realized something deep inside her. This wasn't just a case about one shooting anymore. She was now standing against a system built to protect itself, not the people. Tomorrow, she would give her ruling, and it would change everything. That evening, Nia sat in her hotel room surrounded by piles of paperwork, legal briefs, medical reports, witness transcripts. Her shoulders still ached from the gunshot wound, but she could handle the pain. What she couldn't ignore was the weight of what she was about to do. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Journalists, colleagues, and civil rights groups wanted interviews. Even international news outlets were calling. But she ignored them all. She had work to do. Her ruling tomorrow would speak louder than any interview. A soft knock came at her door. She checked the peephole and saw Daniel Brooks standing in the hallway. He looked nervous but determined. "Mr. Brooks, you shouldn't be here," Nia said as she opened the door. "They already fired me," he said bitterly. "They said I broke confidentiality rules and was insubordinate. But Judge Carter, there's something you need to see before tomorrow." He handed her a manila envelope. "I wasn't the only one recording that day," he said. "TSA recorded the incident from multiple angles, in full HD. They're lying about technical failures. These emails prove it." Nia opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails from TSA's internal servers, all from the morning after the shooting. The first read, "Delete all backup files from April 15th incident. Full system wipe authorized under Protocol 7A. Another, sent 30 minutes later, said, "Confirm all digital evidence has been sanitized. No exceptions." Nia's heart pounded. "They're destroying evidence in a federal case," she said. "Look at the last one," Daniel urged. The final email was from Director Richardson himself. "Any employee found cooperating with the federal investigation without direct authorization will face immediate termination and potential prosecution for violating national security laws." Nia clenched her fists. "They're threatening their own employees to keep quiet." Daniel nodded. "It's worse. 3 of the TSA agents who witnessed your shooting were transferred out of state, emergency reassignments, effective immediately." "They're hiding the witnesses," Nia said coldly. "Mr. Brooks, are you willing to testify about this tomorrow?" "Yes, ma'am," he said firmly. "Even if it means going to prison." "It won't be you going to prison," Nia said. "It'll be them." After he left, Nia called an emergency meeting with her clerks. Within 2 hours, federal marshals were already delivering subpoenas to TSA headquarters, Charlotte Douglas Airport, and every person mentioned in those emails. But she wasn't done yet. Nia picked up the phone and called FBI Director Janet Morrison. "Director Morrison, this is Judge Nia Carter. I need FBI agents at Charlotte Douglas Airport immediately to secure digital evidence before it's destroyed." "Judge Carter," Morrison replied cautiously, "I'm not sure I have the authority." "You do now," Nia said sharply. "I'm issuing a federal preservation order under obstruction of justice laws. Anyone who destroys evidence will face federal charges. And I want Agent Rachel Park from your Civil Rights Division in charge of the investigation. Agent Park is in Los Angeles. Then she better start flying. I want her here by morning." Meanwhile, in Carter, D.C., chaos erupted inside TSA headquarters. Director William Patterson paced behind a long conference table. Around him, his legal team looked terrified. "How did we get here?" Patterson demanded. "One shooting, one judge, and now the FBI is seizing our servers?" "Sir," said Deputy Director Rachel Kim, "we can argue judicial overreach. We can claim Judge Carter is biased. She's the victim." "Of course she's biased," Patterson snapped. "But can we prove it?" TSA General Counsel Michael Davids shook his head. "No. Her record is flawless. She's followed every rule. Her courtroom conduct is textbook. After yesterday's testimony, we have nothing." Patterson sank into his chair. So what's our exposure? David sighed. Criminal charges for tampering with evidence. Civil rights violations. Possible congressional hearings. It's not about money anymore. Judge Carter doesn't want compensation. She wants transformation. And she has the authority to make it happen. 3 words echoed in Patterson's head. Federal Judge Carter. Back in Charlotte, Nia worked through the night. What she was writing would later be called the Carter Standard, a new framework for fair, constitutional policing that would one day be taught in law schools and government agencies. Her phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. Some fights are worth the scars. Proud of you. Judge Thurgood Marshall Jr. Nia smiled for the first time in days. She wasn't alone. Generations of civil rights fighters stood behind her. Tomorrow, she will carry their legacy forward. But she also knew the TSA wouldn't go down quietly. Dawn rose over Charlotte. FBI agents surrounded TSA offices. Federal marshals secured evidence at the airport. News vans lined the streets. When Nia arrived at the courthouse, she had to push through crowds of protesters, reporters, and supporters. "Judge Carter," a reporter shouted, "are you worried about judging your own case?" Nia paused at the steps and turned to face the cameras. It was her first public statement since the shooting. "In America," she said clearly, "we have a principle: justice delayed is justice denied. If I recuse myself, another judge will take over, someone who wasn't shot, who might not understand what this case truly means. The system failed me once. Now it wants to investigate itself. That's not justice. That's self-protection disguised as ethics." Her words went viral within minutes. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick. TSA had brought in a powerful legal team led by former U.S. Attorney General Veronica Hale. Ryan Cole's family sat in the audience, some weeping, others glaring. Civil rights leaders filled every remaining seat. At exactly 9 a.m., Nia entered wearing her judge's robe, and around her neck, a gold chain holding her grandmother's ring. "The court is now in session," the clerk announced. Nia stood tall. Yesterday, this court heard proof of systematic racial bias in TSA operations. Today, we have evidence that TSA destroyed records, intimidated witnesses, and obstructed justice. What began as a case about one shooting has become an investigation into corruption at the highest level. Veronica Hale rose immediately. "Your Honor, I move for immediate dismissal due to judicial bias. It's inappropriate for the victim of a crime to preside over that same case." Nia looked at her. "Counselor Hale, you're saying I should step aside because I was shot. Should judges step aside from murder cases because they're alive? Should women judges step aside from sexual assault cases because they're women? Should black judges step aside from civil rights cases because they're black?" "That's not the same." "It's exactly the same," Nia interrupted. "You're arguing that people who have experienced injustice are unfit to recognize it. I reject that argument completely." Motion denied. Hale sat down, defeated. "The court calls FBI agent Rachel Park," Nia said. Agent Park entered, serious and focused. After being sworn in, she took the stand. "Agent Park," Nia said, "please tell the court what your investigation uncovered." "Your Honor," Agent Park began, "we found years of intentional evidence destruction. TSA created internal procedures, they called them incident management protocols, to make discrimination complaints disappear. We found 847 racial profiling complaints over the last 3 years. 831 were dismissed without investigation. The rest were handled through informal counseling." The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Nia raised her hand for silence. "Agent Park, did you find anything related to my shooting?" "Yes, Your Honor." Within hours of the incident, TSA began deleting footage, transferring witnesses, and planning a public story that blamed you. "We even found emails referring to you as the problem judge, with instructions to damage your credibility before you could expose them." Veronica Hale jumped up to object, but Nia overruled her instantly. "And finally," Agent Park said, her voice steady but grim, "we discovered this wasn't Officer Cole's first shooting. He killed a Hispanic man in Denver 2 years ago. That case was also ruled justified, but our investigation shows the same racial bias and the same kind of cover-up. The courtroom exploded. Reporters rushed out to file breaking news. Family members of victims sobbed. Officer Cole sat frozen, his head in his hands. Nia slammed her gavel until silence returned. Order. Order in the court. Agent Park, she said, is your investigation still ongoing? Yes, Your Honor. We found evidence of criminal activity at every level of TSA leadership, from individual officers to senior officials in Carter. The room fell silent again. Everyone now understood. This was no longer a simple case. It was the beginning of a national reckoning. Elijah had never published a story that could destroy powerful people's careers, until now. Mia dismissed Agent Park and looked out over the crowded courtroom. The moment she had been preparing for had finally arrived, not just to deliver a verdict against Ryan Cole, but to judge an entire system that had created people like him. This court will recess for 30 minutes, she announced, her voice steady but heavy with purpose. When we return, I will deliver my ruling. As Mia stepped down from the bench, she understood what was at stake. The next 30 minutes would decide whether America would finally evolve beyond its fears and biases, or stay trapped in them forever. She was about to test how much power one woman with a gavel really had. Inside her chambers, she sat alone, staring at the draft of her ruling. Her shoulder ached from the wound that had nearly ended her life, but her mind was sharp. The pages in front of her contained words that could reshape civil rights law in America. 30 minutes. That was all she had before history would remember her decision, one way or another. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Enter, she said. To her surprise, 3 senior judges walked in. Judge Veronica Price from the 2nd Circuit, Judge David Park from the 9th, and Judge Sofia Delgado from the 11th. Each of them was famous for landmark rulings in civil rights law. Nia, Judge Price said softly, we flew in to be here for your ruling. Not to influence it, but to stand with you when you deliver it. Judge Park nodded. You know what's coming. Your decision will go to the Supreme Court. Every federal agency will challenge it. You'll need allies. Judge Delgado sat across from her. Mia, I've been on the bench for 22 years. I've never seen a case with this much power to change the system. But I've also seen what happens to judges who go up against the system too directly. Mia looked at them. 3 of the most respected judges in America, all of whom had fought their own battles against discrimination. Are you trying to talk me out of this? She asked quietly. Never, Judge Price said. We're here to remind you that you're not alone. Whatever ruling you issue today, the 4th Circuit stands behind you. And if anyone tries to destroy your career for it, they'll have to go through us first. Mia felt a surge of gratitude and an even greater weight of responsibility. Her decision wouldn't just affect her life. It would affect every future judge who dared to hold powerful institutions accountable. I need 5 more minutes, she said. When the judges left, Mia picked up her phone and called her mother in Atlanta. Mama, are you watching? Baby, the whole neighborhood is watching, her mother said proudly. Mrs. Moore brought her TV outside so everyone could see. They've got you on every channel. Mia smiled faintly. Mama, I'm about to do something that might make some powerful people hate me. Nia Daniel Carter, her mother said in that firm, familiar tone. Your grandmother cleaned houses for white families who treated her like furniture. Your father spent 6 days in jail over a ticket that was mailed to the wrong address. Your brother got stopped by police 17 times before he turned 25. You think we're scared of you making enemies? Baby, we've been waiting our whole lives for someone like you to stand in that courtroom. Her mother's voice softened. You do what's right, baby. We'll handle the consequences together. Mia blinked back tears. I love you, Mama. I love you more. Now go make history. Mia hung up, straightened her robe, and walked back toward the courtroom. The gallery was filled to capacity. The overflow crowd watched from the hallways on TV screens. Outside, thousands of people gathered, chanting and praying. Everyone knew this was not just a verdict, It was a turning point in America's history. When Mia took her seat, the room fell silent. Cameras rolled. The nation waited. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented over the last 2 days," she began. "What we have seen is not the act of one bad officer, but the predictable result of systemic failures that have been ignored for years." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "Officer Ryan Cole shot me because he was trained to see black bodies as threats. He was taught to trust his instincts over evidence. He was protected by supervisors who viewed racial bias as an acceptable cost of security. And when his actions came to light, the institution that employed him tried to destroy evidence, silence witnesses, and blame the victim." Ryan Cole's lawyer started to rise, but Mia raised a hand and continued firmly. "This court finds Officer Ryan Cole guilty of assault with a deadly weapon under color of federal authority. But individual guilt is not enough. The Transportation Security Administration itself is guilty of systematic civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and institutional corruption." Gasps filled the courtroom. The air grew tense. "Therefore," Mia continued, "this court orders the following. First, the immediate suspension of all TSA security protocols pending a full civil rights review. Second, mandatory federal oversight of all TSA operations for a minimum of 5 years. Third, the firing of any TSA employee who participated in destroying evidence or intimidating witnesses." Veronica Hale, the TSA's lead attorney, shot to her feet. "Your Honor, you don't have the authority." "Fourth," Mia continued, ignoring her, "new training programs must be created in cooperation with civil rights organizations. Fifth, an independent civilian oversight board will be established, with full power to investigate and prosecute discrimination complaints." Reporters began typing furiously. Phones buzzed. Activists cheered. But Mia wasn't finished. Sixth, immediate suspension without pay for every supervisor who ignored reports of bias. Seventh, mandatory racial bias testing for all current TSA employees, with termination for those who fail to meet constitutional standards. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Officials shouted into phones. Some people cried. Others applauded. But Mia kept her focus. She reached for a final document, a thick packet that would soon be called the Carter Doctrine. It outlined a new national framework for balancing security and civil rights. "Finally," she said, her voice strong and unwavering, "this court establishes new constitutional standards for all federal law enforcement officers. From this day forward, no badge gives you the right to see threats where none exist. No uniform gives you permission to treat citizens as enemies. No agency may hide behind security while trampling on the very rights it claims to protect." She looked straight at the cameras, broadcasting her words across the nation. "This court's ruling is effective immediately and cannot be appealed under emergency constitutional authority. Any attempt to ignore or overturn these orders will be treated as contempt of federal court." She slammed her gavel once. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot in reverse, not destroying, but creating something new. Chaos erupted instantly. TSA lawyers shouted in protest. Federal marshals began executing arrest warrants for evidence tampering. Ryan Cole sat in silence, knowing his career was over and his freedom might soon follow. Then, from the back of the courtroom, Reverend Elijah Brooks stood and began clapping. Slow, deliberate, powerful. One by one, others rose to their feet. Civil rights activists, reporters, citizens, and families who had suffered discrimination. The applause built into a thunderous ovation. Mia stayed seated, tears streaming down her cheeks. She knew the cheers weren't for her, but for the principle she had just written into law, justice for all. Outside the courthouse, chaos of a different kind was unfolding. Veronica Hale stood before a sea of microphones, her face red with anger. "This is judicial activism of the worst kind," she shouted. "Judge Carter has overstepped her authority and created a constitutional crisis. The TSA will appeal this ruling to the Supreme Court immediately." A reporter called out, "But your client shot her, counselor. How can you say she doesn't have standing?" Hale snapped, "Being a victim doesn't give someone the right to rewrite federal law. This ruling will be overturned within weeks." But what Hale didn't know was that Mia had prepared for this. Her clerks had worked all night researching every legal argument possible. The Carter Doctrine was built so firmly on constitutional law that even a hostile Supreme Court would find it hard to strike down. Back inside, Mia met again with Judges Price, Park, and Delgado. Judge Price said quietly, "You just declared war on the entire federal security establishment. They're going to come for you." Mia nodded. "I know. But Judge Price, they already came for me with bullets. If I back down now, what message does that send to every black person who gets profiled or detained?" Judge Park looked at his phone. The Justice Department already wants an emergency stay. Homeland Security is saying your ruling threatens national safety. Even some federal judges think you've gone too far. "Let them think that," Mia said. "My ruling stands on the Constitution, not on popularity." Judge Delgado smiled. "Mia, what you've done today is something this country has needed for 50 years. But you've also painted a target on your back. From now on, every move you make will be judged politically. Are you ready for that?" Mia thought of her nephew Elijah, of Daniel Brooks, who had lost his job for telling the truth, of the 847 discrimination complaints that had been dismissed without review. "I've been preparing for this my whole life," she said. "I just didn't realize it." Across town, Ryan Cole sat alone in his dark apartment. The termination letter lay open on his table. His phone buzzed non-stop, reporters, lawyers, hate groups calling him a martyr, civil rights groups demanding more charges. His wife, Lauren, had taken their children to her mother's house. Before leaving, she'd said the words that broke him. "Ryan, I've been married to you for 7 years, and I never knew I was married to a racist." His union rep had been blunt. "There's no saving you. The video is clear, the confession is on record, and Judge Carter's ruling makes you a test case. You're going to prison." But Ryan's real punishment wasn't legal. It was realizing that everything he believed about himself was wrong. He thought he was protecting America. He thought his fear was justified. He thought he was a good man doing his duty. But he had shot an innocent woman because her confidence made him feel small. He pulled the trigger because a black woman dared to question him instead of obeying. The man he thought he was, protector, patriot, professional, had never existed. He had been a tool of a broken system, and only now did he understand it. Meanwhile, Daniel Brooks was packing up his small apartment. He'd already received 3 job offers, 2 from civil rights organizations and 1 from the FBI's Civil Rights Division. His mother called him, crying tears of pride. "Baby," she said, "your great-grandfather was beaten for registering to vote. Your grandfather couldn't get jobs because he was black. Your father faced discrimination his whole career. But you stood up in court and told the truth that changed everything. You broke the chain." Daniel's phone buzzed again. It was a text from Judge Carter. "Mr. Brooks," it read, "I'm recommending you for the Medal of Valor for federal employees. Your courage saved not just my life, but the rights of countless Americans who'll never know your name." Daniel smiled. "Just did what was right, Your Honor," he replied. Her message continued, "P.S. Agent Park says the FBI wants to hire you. Interested in making sure this never happens again." Daniel looked around his apartment, the box of his old TSA uniform, the termination letter, and the judge's text glowing on his screen. The choice was easy. "When do I start?" he replied. As the sun set over Charlotte, the day's drama ended, but the real work had just begun. Judge Nia Carter had shattered the old system. Rebuilding it into something just and fair would take years of courage, vigilance, and hope. But for the first time in a long time, America had taken a step toward becoming the country it always claimed to be. The woman they had shot for asking questions had changed the rules about who gets to ask them. 6 months later, Nia Carter walked through the same security checkpoint at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. But everything was different now. The TSA agents were new, trained under the new Carter Doctrine. The metal detectors were the same, but the feeling in the air had changed. Before, there had been fear and tension. Now, there was respect and calm professionalism. "Ma'am, please place your items on the belt," said a polite young officer. She looked about 25, with kind eyes and a name tag that read Officer Brooks. Nia smiled. Are you related to Daniel Brooks by any chance? The officer's face brightened. He's my brother. Wait. Oh my God. You're Judge Carter. Nia placed her briefcase on the conveyor belt. How is Daniel? He graduated from the FBI Academy last month, Officer Brooks said proudly. He's working on civil rights cases now. He says you changed his life. He changed mine first, Nia replied. She walked through the metal detector. No alarms, no yelling, no guns. Just a normal security check done with respect, the way it always should have been. As she picked up her belongings, Officer Brooks called out softly, Judge Carter, thank you for everything. Nia smiled and walked toward her gate. But she wasn't alone. Waiting nearby was Elijah Moore, the journalist who had helped reveal the truth about what happened to her. Judge Carter, Elijah said, standing as she came closer. I'm flying to D.C. too. Congress wants to talk about expanding the Carter Doctrine to local police departments. Nia sat beside him. Do you think they'll do it? Elijah showed her his tablet. Look, 73% of Americans support your ruling. Even 61% of Republicans agree. It turns out most people don't want to be shot by government agents just for asking questions. They sat quietly for a while, watching travelers move through the airport. Black families traveled without fear. Arab Americans boarded planes without being stared at. Latino passengers asked questions without being treated as suspicious. Elijah, Nia said softly, do you think this change will last? He thought about it. Judge, you didn't just write new rules. You showed everyone the old ones. You made it impossible for people to ignore the truth. Once people see that truth, they can't pretend anymore. That kind of truth doesn't disappear. Nia's phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Supreme Court upholds Carter Doctrine in 7-2 decision. She showed Elijah the screen. Well, that answers that question. Elijah grinned. Justice Thomas wrote the majority opinion. Even he couldn't deny it, it was that clear. Congress had never seen evidence this strong. Their flight was called. As they boarded, Nia thought about her journey. 6 months ago, she had been shot because of her skin color. Now, she was flying to Carter, D.C. to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom for advancing civil rights. But to Nia, the real victory wasn't the medal, the court ruling, or the new policies. The real victory was Officer Brooks, who now treated every traveler with respect. It was Daniel Brooks, who investigated civil rights violations instead of ignoring them. It was all the small moments where justice replaced fear. As the plane lifted off, Nia thought about Ryan Cole, the officer who shot her. He was now serving 3 years in federal prison for assault under color of authority. His appeals were denied. His career was over. Nia didn't feel joy about that. She felt sad, for a system that had taught him to fear people like her, and then left him behind when that fear turned violent. When the plane reached cruising altitude, Nia opened her laptop to review her speech for tomorrow's ceremony. But instead of reading her notes, she started writing something new. 6 months ago, I was shot in an airport terminal for asking questions while black. Today, I'm flying to accept an award for surviving and demanding justice. But the real heroes aren't the ones who got medals or headlines. They are the Daniel Brooks who chose truth over comfort. The Elijah Moores who refused to hide injustice behind fancy words. Dr. Veronica Reyes who documented violence so no one could deny it later. She paused and thought about all the people who had been profiled or mistreated but didn't have the power she did to fight back. The Carter Doctrine didn't create new rights, she typed. It just said that the rights we already have must be respected equally, no matter what color your skin is. That shouldn't have been revolutionary. The fact that it was shows how far we had fallen from our country's promises. Nia saved the document and looked out the window at the land below. Somewhere down there, TSA agents were learning new ways to treat passengers as citizens, not threats. Police departments were studying her ruling to avoid repeating the same mistakes. Federal judges were using her decision to expand civil rights across the nation. Her phone buzzed again, a text from her nephew, Elijah, a college sophomore at Howard University. Aunt Nia, I flew through Dallas yesterday. The TSA agent was super respectful. When I told him why I was traveling, he said, "Have a great trip, sir. Thanks for making it so I don't have to be scared of airports anymore." Nia smiled and replied, "You never should have had to be scared in the first place, but I'm glad you're not anymore." As the plane began to land in Carter, Nia thought again about everything that had happened. She had been shot for asking questions, but that act of violence had made her stronger, and it had changed the country. The woman they had tried to silence had become the voice that forced America to listen. The bullets had missed, but Nia Carter's message had hit its target. Justice, she realized, was the strongest weapon of all. 3 months later, Nia stood again at the same podium where she had once delivered her famous ruling. But this time, she wasn't wearing a judge's robe. She wore a simple black suit. "I became a judge to serve justice," she told the crowded courtroom. "But I've learned that sometimes justice means stepping outside the system, to change it from the ground up." Nia Carter, former federal judge, now civil rights advocate, walked away from the bench that had given her power and into the world where real change was happening. Behind her, she left a better legal system, a new generation of protections, and one powerful truth that would never fade. When they try to silence you with violence, respond with justice so loud that the whole world has to listen. And America, finally, was listening. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more kind and powerful stories. Watch our next video for another unforgettable journey. And share this story with someone who needs it today.